Thank you. Next item would be the approval of the agenda. We all have received the agenda before this meeting, and I'd like to entertain a motion to accept the agenda as been presented, please. Have a motion from Ms. Williams.
Second.
Second from Mr. Haynes. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. The vote's unanimous. Next item would be to approve minutes from the prior meeting. We all received those before the meeting, so to entertain a motion, we accept the minutes as presented. Have a motion from Ms. Williams.
Second.
Second by Mr. Smith. All those in favor signify by saying aye, please.
Aye.
Aye. Vote's unanimous. I'm going to take about 5 or 10 minutes, if I could, please, before we get into the report into the business. So, yes, go ahead.
I apologize.
No problem.
We are trying to stream, and I'm getting the message that we're not being heard out there. So if you could give us just a few
We'll
minutes.
call a recess for 5 or 10 minutes then.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah, they need to hear us now. That's part. All right, let me call her. I'm gonna get her on the phone. Hey Siri, call Casey's phone. But
Question, your comment about streaming
go ahead.
is the public can't, or are you worried about just Casey?
Public.
Okay, that's what I
Public.
want.
That's. Hey Casey, I've got you here. We're gonna set a recess right now because we don't think that anyone's hearing us. We want to be sure on that before we go further. So if you'll stay on here until we. Since you can't hear or see anything yet. Megan, is that what information you're getting? See or hear? Okay. Jenny's seeing it, but it's upside down for her, so.
Steve, at principal's meeting, remember, we physically moved that camera itself, just turn. Right.
We're working on it. For everybody.
They said you can't hear it now? Oh, Jenny did? And said, we can hear it. Yeah, don't worry about Casey or John Hagan, we can call them on cell phone. Yeah, I wouldn't even worry about that piece. I'd worry about, can they hear us while we're streaming?
So we're streaming out there. And then I'll just use my phone for John Hagan.
Mike, can you, we'll have Mike do a little bit of a mic check. Can you confirm with Jenny that she can hear Mr. Waller? Do you mind to do a little?
No, I don't have any problem whatsoever. Can you hear me? Anybody out there?
Check. Check. Can they hear that one? Is this mic going through to? Brooke can hear it? Okay, so we're good.
She can hear Steve or she can hear us. She can hear me too? Okay. Then we'll go ahead and get started. Before we get into the report section of the agenda, I've got about 5 or 10 minutes if I could, please. tonight we've got about 6 reports that are going to come under here, and they are reports that contain a significant amount of information related to what we're trying to do or what we think we're going to be trying to do. All of these reports have been put together with input from the staff, administration, parents, and various committees. We need to hear the reports. We need to let the presenters present. Each one of these reports are going to stimulate questions, no doubt, thoughts, alternatives, possibilities, okay? Tonight is an informational meeting with regards to these reports. We're not going to have a debate. We're not going to be able to solve the problems. We're not going to be able to try and replace what these committees have given us as information, all right? So there will be no debates. If there are questions, concerns, there should be a notepad by each of us. Please write down your thoughts, comments, or questions. Please write them down. I don't want to stifle creativity or dialogue. However, this meeting is not the venue to solve or come to a conclusion. There's no action required under any of these reports. None whatsoever. No action required at all. I would suggest and ask that you please give whatever comments, questions, suggestions to Morgana and let her share those with the staff. We want to be respectful of the presenters. They are presenting the information that they've put together with a committee that I'm sure has come to a consensus. We have 4 methods that can allow input from anybody in the community. Telephone messages, emails, Facebook page information, and a drop box at the central office as well as here for anybody to offer input, suggestions, comments, or thoughts. Respect our presenters. That's what they're doing. They're sending and bringing a message. All right? And we've always heard we don't want to shoot the messenger by any means, okay? They're bringing information that's been a consensus of a committee. We want to set a date next Thursday or Friday. And I would like each of us to look at our schedules and let Robin know right now whether Thursday or Friday is better for each of us. Robin, my comment would be I'm open any day. Whatever's best for the rest of the folks, I'm open, any of them, all right? So whatever you can get from this group as Thursday, Friday, and whatever time I'm available. And we'll go through this again, and we'll try to come to a consensus of a conclusion on what we could or could not do with regards to each of these subjects. Tonight is not the night to do it. Tonight is the night to digest information, all right? Before we get started, I got a few things I'd like to read. First thing, these are several quotes by some folks. We need to remember them because we're a team, all right? This board is not autocratic by no means. We're a team. We're working together. And several of these have stuck with me over the years. And this one, first one, should be familiar to a lot of you, and each of the others will be too. The ultimate measure of a person is not where he stands in times of comfort or convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy. We all know that's Martin Luther King. A lot of times this last one isn't it. They don't hear this last part of it. The measure of a person is in the lives he's touched. We're touching a lot of folks, a whole lot of folks. We're challenged right now. We need to be aware of the challenge. We need to be aware of the folks. It's not the critic who counts. It's not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or whether the doer of deeds could have done better. The credit belongs to those who are in the arena. We're in it right now, folks. We're faced with some difficult decisions. We're faced with some difficult times and issues. whose face is marred by dust, sweat, and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs and comes up short again and again. We may come up short. We may have to change. We may have to do something different. Things may not work out exactly as we have them planned. There isn't effort without error and shortcomings. Never happens. Who does actually strive to do the deed, who knows the great enthusiasm, the great devotion, who spends himself a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end triumph and high achievements, and who at worst, if he fails, at least he fails while doing greatly. We got a lot of work to do. It's going to impact a lot of people. So this place shall never be with those cold, timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat. We all know that's Teddy Roosevelt. These last two, you probably never heard of a fellow named Joseph Joubert. Never was published. Some of you may have. Never was published till after he died. These two things have stuck with me a long time. It's better to discuss an issue without settling it than to settle it without discussing it. That's what we're here to do tonight. We want to settle sometime, but we need to discuss it. There needs to be a lot of discussion. You folks have gone through a lot of discussion. A lot of this is the first time we're going to hear and see it. We need to discuss it. We need to understand it. That's why I would say we're not going to settle anything. We're not taking any action tonight. We need to discuss it. We need to hear it. And next week is when we're going to really put our efforts at coming to the conclusion. And Kirk, you commented earlier, it's hard to get information today and make a decision, all right? So we're going to get information today, and we've got until next Thursday or Friday to think about it, come up with questions. And I know the more time, Kirk, you have, you put some real good thought into them, all right? So we've got between now and next Thursday. And next Thursday or Friday, we're going to discuss this to where we have a direction one way or another. We're not going to do it tonight. Got questions? Write them down. Comments? Write them down. Give them to Morgana. Joseph Joubert. Last one. Children need models rather than critics. This guy's 1754. We're in 2020. It stands pretty well to reason today, right now. Children need models rather than critics. Look him up, Joseph Joubert. Got some good stuff. Last item I want to leave you with, you know, the biggest and best book of instructions, directions in life to me has been the Bible. And I'm not going to preach, but I'm going to give you a few verses to look at from 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 3 through 5, if you'll allow me. For the time will come when people will not put up with sound doctrine. Instead, to suit their own desires, they will gather around them a great number of teachers to say what their itching ears want to hear. They will turn their ears away from the truth and turn aside to myths. But you, keep your head in all situations, endure hardship, do the work of an evangelist, discharge all the duties of your ministry. The Bible's a good book of instructions, folks. And those verses somehow or another pop to me today. We've got a lot of work to do. We're faced with some big challenges. That's the best instruction book that ever was made. So, we're ready to get going with the rest of this agenda. Somehow or another, I have the chair tonight. If anybody needs to be recognized, please acknowledge to me, and I will recognize you. If we could, I'm not sure if anybody is ready to give Robin a date, but again, my date is whatever everybody else wants. I'm ready.
Either works, but Thursday's preferable. 5:30.
Thursday.
I'm in for Thursday.
Yep.
Is that good for the rest of you folks?
At what time?
5:30?
Yes. Dean, at work?
Yep.
25th.
You good with that, Beth? Okay.
Mr. Waller,
Yes, sir.
could you just let the audience know that we know that we're upside down and we're working on it? I'm
Maybe
reading
they think
comments
after my
on YouTube.
preaching they think I need to be upside down. What do you think? Yes.
No,
If
we're working on it.
we're working on whatever video concerns that you folks may be seeing out there. The first concern that we're made aware of was that we're upside down. Been upside down all my life. So, how we doing back there, Keith? We're still upside down? Right on. Okay, so the next item on the agenda would be reports from Margana, Casey Wolf, Chad Thompson, Ginger Carter, Megan Morris, and Megan Mortis, and Kim White. So, Margana, you starting?
Yes, sir.
Please.
So on June 1st, we sent a parent survey out to ask 3 broad questions. We sent it out to parents, do you plan to send your child? Do you plan to attend in-service, in-person classes during the 2021 school year? And in parentheses, we put, we will be following CDC guidelines and possibly a modified schedule that will include going to school on certain days of the week. And so we wanted to gauge on June 1st what that looked like among our parents and caregivers. The second question we asked was about transportation. Do I click? Oh, I'm sorry. When school resumes, would your student be riding the school bus? Yes, no, or maybe. 55% said yes or maybe that they would be riding the school bus. And the last question we asked was, does your current internet access enable you to be successful for online learning? And we had 81% respond yes. I also wanted to mention that we received 2,998 responses from this parent survey. So we had just about 3,000 parents or caregivers respond to it. Our purpose was twofold: to understand our parents and the mindset of returning to school, just get a broad spectrum, and to allow our parents some voice, and most importantly, to have our parents and caregivers start to think about our 2021 reopening of school and how it will somehow probably look a little different. We do plan to send other surveys and include our staff members along our journey for figuring out how to reopen, and to our parents in July and August. And one thing that we anticipate is, how have our parents and caregivers' perceptions changed from June 1st to the July or the August 1st time? Because that's a 10-week span. And as we know, watching the coronavirus, a lot of data and information can change week to week. So we felt like throughout the 10 weeks, we could gather more information. So today, on June 15th, I just mentioned that we're 10 weeks away from opening school. Tonight's presentations are informational. We're not recommending anything to you all or asking for information. It's the first time that our 3 task force committees will be presenting to you all. You probably will have questions along the way, so feel free to write those down, ask some questions. They're not polished plans, they're just key ideas for you all to know what we've been talking about. I would ask the board for consideration for a work session, and Mr. Waller, you've already got that set for us. We think right now, if we're, as a team, we're prioritizing there's a lot of questions to answer, I understand that, but the ones that I think we should consider for our agenda at the work session are an athletic conversation, a good child care conversation, and a calendar conversation. And when I say calendar, I mean when we go to school, not how we go to school. Being 10 weeks away, how we go to school is going to take a much lengthier conversation. So I just wanted to mention that. Clay Horton from the Green River Area Health Department is willing to join us at our work session if we think that that would be helpful. He will definitely Skype or Zoom in. And just a note that our communication email is working well. You have a copy. I think Ms. Newton gave you all a copy of all of the emails tonight that have been received. And if I received an email in my inbox, I put it in that folder as well and responded to anybody that I was going to give you all a copy of it as well. So as far as we know, to date, today, you have everything you need, and then we will print for you also everything between now and the work session. So you'll have that information. But it is working very well, so we encourage people to keep using that. And we are ready to start our task force committee updates, and we're going to start with Mr. Thompson. We're going to start with Casey Wolf, looking at logistics.
Casey? Casey?
Yes.
Okay, you're on.
Okay, I hope everyone can hear me. Good evening, Mr. Waller and board. I first would like to share with you a little bit about what the Logistics Task Force Committee has been working on over the past 2 months. The Logistics Task Force Committee has a pretty wide area that we've been looking at. In order to try to focus this a little bit this evening and in our task force meetings, we have really looked at 7 specific areas. So I want to talk a little bit about each area and give you a little bit of a summary of some of our discussion. The Logistics Task Force is a rather large committee. We have a lot of members. We have school staff, but we also have some parents on our committee. So first, one of our major key focus areas is looking at the different types of reopening models for the school calendar. So like Ms. Stanley just said, this is the when. This is the component of the school calendar. Do we have a possible early start? Do we have a traditional start? Do we have a late start? Or just included in the calendar are preparation for possible intermittent closures. So we have looked at all of those different types of calendars and discussed those. Number 2, the second key focus area would be the how. That is the reopening model for daily school attendance. So we've talked about, would we look at the possibility of hybrid models? Would we look at a full reopening? Would we look at even possibly a fully online schedule, maybe scheduled rotation or different opt-in models, or even possibly using more than one of those at the same time? So we have looked at some of that and discussed that. Our third key area is maintenance. We have looked at air quality, looking at the necessity to have uniform cleaning procedures and protocols throughout our school buildings, supplies, the necessity to order the appropriate supplies for sanitation and cleaning in all of our schools, and also the appropriate signage that will need to be hung throughout all of our schools and office buildings before August. The fourth area, key area that we looked at is transportation. And this one is an enormous area standing alone. First and foremost, we've looked at and discussed what ability do we have to transport our students if we were to have to use a scheduled rotation or if we used some type of opt-in schedule. We've looked at the ability of our bus drivers to make sure that all federal and state guidelines are being followed, in addition to the possibility of wearing proper PPE and doing additional tasks that might need to take place, such as temperature checks and requiring social distancing on our school buses. So we have been talking about all of that. Fifth, our number 5 focus area is the area of nurses. This one is a very important piece of the puzzle. regardless of the manner with which we may or may not come back to school, nurses are going to be a very important piece of the puzzle. Not only do they have their daily nurse task,
Excuse
but they
me.
are going to be
Excuse.
responsible for
Can you hear me?
teaching proper hand washing, proper hygiene.
Hey, Casey,
Yes.
you went from 5 to 6 there, I believe, by accident, and I think you
I'm
skipped over
sorry.
food service.
No, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Transportation's number 4 and number 5 is nurses.
Do you have food service in there next? Because we have
I
5 as
do,
food
but
service.
Um,
As long as you're going to cover it, we're okay. But I just want to make sure you just didn't skip food service.
no, I'm sorry, I haven't gotten to food service yet. Sorry.
Okay.
I can't, I'm
My
sorry, I
mistake.
can't see anything that's going on there or hear anything. So,
Thank you.
Go right ahead, Casey.
okay. So with nurses, again, they will be responsible for teaching proper hand washing, proper hygiene, and proper respiratory hygiene. So there are going to be a lot of pieces to the puzzle. There'll be also a component of daily student temperature checks, if that is a requirement at the time of school starting, tracking school illnesses, monitoring possible spikes in illness in our school buildings, and then developing uniform procedures and protocols if a student were to become sick in our schools. In addition to all those things, developing and continuing communication with families and having multiple nurse locations within the school building. So nurses alone have an enormous responsibility in this. Number 6, focus area number 6 would be food service. Charlotte and our food service staff has done an amazing job the last 2 months of school, being able to serve all of our students at home the way they did. So we have looked at a lot of different components. We feel like that we know that if all of our students are at home, we can serve them. But what if some of our students are at home and what if some of our students are at school? We need to look at proper uniform procedures and protocols for cafeterias, eating areas, and cleaning procedures. So food service would be another area that would be important in this process. Last and definitely not least, our number 7 key focus area is the actual school itself. This one component has an enormous number of components that are monumentally important to our students. You know, we need to look at, for example, a daily schedule. What if our students come to school on an A-B schedule? What if we only have half of our students at school? What if another half of our students are at home and listening, live streaming, and working online? What would that look like? What if we need to bring our kids into school on a different schedule, say maybe not their classic schedule that we have right now, which is 7:30 to 2:30 for elementary, and then 8:25 or 8:15 to 3:25 for high school? What will that look like, and do we need to make changes there? What will our classrooms look like? How many students can we fit in a classroom once we start school, where we are required to honor social distancing and our students must be 6 feet apart? Or 10 feet apart in some instances. How many students will be able to get into a classroom and keep them there safely? Also looking at surfaces in the classroom. In an elementary classroom, you walk in there and you feel like you're at home. And there may be a couch and a rug and a chair and beautiful curtains and all of those things that we typically want in an elementary classroom. But now we have to look at all of those things and say, is that safe? Are there germs there? Do we need those things to come out of our buildings? So we need to look at that possibility. Morning procedures and afternoon procedures, we're going to have to look at. Do we need to stagger bringing children into the school at the same time? If we're required to honor social distancing, how will we do that? So we would have to look at possible procedures for early release or some different things with in the afternoon. If we were going to honor social distancing, will we need to allow our walkers to leave at 2:20 and our bus riders at 2:30 and our car riders at 2:35? If so, how will we do some of those things within our schools? Breakfast and lunch. We discussed things just as simple as, serving breakfast every day and serving lunch to our students every day. How will we do that safely? Are we going to allow our students to use the cafeteria? Are we going to have to social distance in the cafeteria? Is it even appropriate? Will students need to eat lunch in their classroom? These are all things we've discussed because it's a possibility that we might have to make adjustments to the current way we eat breakfast and lunch. School-wide restroom breaks and hand washing schedules. We have seen some suggestions from Department of Public Health that, we need our students, if they're going to be at school, they're washing hands and they're washing them once an hour or things such as that. So we'll have to build in some different schedules that we've never had to do before, but we will need to build those into our schedules for our students throughout the school day. Recess is another one that we've looked at. Can students go out and what can they do on the playground? We have talked about our students with special needs and other special populations. If our students are required to wear masks, then will this be appropriate? Will this even be possible for some of our students? Let's see, hallway procedures and just other procedures throughout the school day that we may have to adjust or change in order to honor social distancing or any type of health issue or guideline that we might necessitate following in order to bring our students back to school. So that is a summary of the last probably about 2 months worth of work. The logistics task force has spent a lot of time discussing. I think you will hear when Ms. Carter and Mr. Thompson present here in a moment that a lot of the discussion they've had will depend on the types of schedules and some of the components that I've discussed here just briefly. Does anyone have any specific questions they'd like to ask at this time?
We'll get those to Morgana if there are, and that way you'll have time to digest them. But I think the information that you've given us is right there enough to talk for 4 or 5 days about. But that's neither. I'm sure we're going to hear some more suggestions and comments. But I do appreciate the time and you taking the time during, I guess if you're on vacation or wherever you're at in Florida, having a good time while we're up here dealing with this. But enjoy it. Thank you.
Thank you, Casey.
Next up would be Mr. Thompson.
Now that we've got the easy stuff done.
I'm not sure where it gets to be easy.
I'm right there with you. Thank you, first of all, for your time this evening and letting us give a presentation of a summary of what our task force have been working on for the past month and a half. And what we're giving you tonight is simply a summary. It's not all inclusive of all of our entire conversations that we've had, but it is a summary, and there's a lot more information that goes into these. So in the area of academics, we searched and discussed the area of 9 different topics of conversation. Those topics include assessment, intervention, curriculum review, professional development, platforms in terms of technology, special education, preschool, mental health, and grading. one of the first things that we have done is we set an academic goal. And our challenge to the committee was to set an aggressive academic goal to get back to pre-existing levels or exceeding pre-existing levels of when we left for academic achievement. And the academic goal we set was Henderson County School students will be back to pre-existing levels or exceeding academic performance based upon MAP by winter of 2021. We realize that is an aggressive goal, but we don't ever get anywhere if we're not aggressive, like Mr. Waller stated earlier on. In terms of assessment, we broke these down in terms of the 3 different pieces that we're going to look at, in terms of whether it's fully NTI, whether it's a hybrid, like Ms. Farmer said, is it 2 days in, 3 days out? Then we know what full in looks like. So we broke assessment down in terms of the 3 different types of potential reentry or reopening programs. Assessment will lead us to interventions here in a minute. So when we're talking about assessment, we're not talking about state assessment. We're talking about assessment that can give our teachers and our staff an indication of what has been either the summer slide or potential loss of academics over that 9 weeks. So it gives us a good gauge. So if we were to do an NTI, we would have the ability to do formative and summative assessments given by the teacher through technology resources. If we did a hybrid type calendar, we would use formative, summative assessments, MAP within the first 2 weeks of face-to-face, STAR benchmark assessments for K2, Math Common Assessments, Math in Focus Assessments, Middle School Common Summative Assessments, Benchmarks, IXL, Middle School Reading Intervention Programs such as Reading Plus, Middle School Formative Assessments, and High School Pre-Assessments. If we went on a normal schedule where kids were in 5 days a week, we know what that looks like. We would still use the same pieces of evidence that we would use in a hybrid.
Makes sense, thank you.
Now, in terms of assessments, we would give those assessments. We would get our results back. We do know our kids well enough that we're going to start with interventions, hopefully sooner than later, even throughout the summer with different options. But those would be a solid baseline for us to really prescribe interventions. And I broke those interventions into 2 different parts. What's going to happen, potentially what could happen this summer, and what would happen when we got back to school. So in the summer, if we are still NTI, it is dependent upon the allowance from state and school as to whether we can bring students in. If we decide we're going to look at a hybrid model, we have already had conversation around summer camps, jumpstart programs, allowances depending on state and local, with our targets for Tier 2 and Tier 3 and Tier 2 students. Each school will host their own. Middle school will focus on 6th grade transition and reading and potentially running intersessions during break, say over fall break, over Christmas, during those times. Intervention during the summer, if the board decides to go on a normal schedule, it will be same as hybrid. Now, keep in mind, we're in the process of designing a intervention program that is going to be potentially voluntary starting in July, that it doesn't matter what calendar, what mode of reopening that we do. So we're potentially looking at that right now, and hopefully we'll have some information in the next couple weeks about where our students can sign up voluntarily for a computer program for our students to get some intervention over the next, hopefully starting about 2nd week of July all the way through August.
Thank you.
Then during the school year, our intervention, if we're NTI, once again, that depends on the allowance from state and school as to whether we can bring kids in and what that may look like. If it's hybrid, allowance depending on state and local, targeting with Tier 3 and Tier 2 students, and open to all. Teacher and data-based referrals will be the basis of who we bring in. ESS before and after school, RTI during the day, and potentially running intersessions during the break. If we're on normal schedule, whenever we start, if we are back in school 5 days a week on normal, we'll run the same as hybrid, but we will have more frequent basis with ESS and RTI during the day and after. The third area of concentration was curriculum review. We have already done a lot of this work back at the end of May. That's what our professional development was wrapped around. We got our teachers together, and so regardless of whether it's an NTI or a hybrid opening model or a normal opening model, we have already done a lot of this work. We did some vertical and horizontal planning with our teachers to where, say for example, all of our third grade teachers got together, looked at their curriculum. What did they not get to? What did they not get to with a lot of rigor? What did they feel their students from the data that we received was not met to the depth that it needed? Then we took that information and we handed up to the fourth grade teachers. Fourth grade did the same thing. They handed up to the fifth grade, and so on and so forth up the line all the way through 12th grade. Then we spent some time with that. When we handed those up, we spent some time with them looking at how they're going to either scaffold their instruction with what was not met with rigor or was not met at all during that time. How are they going to weave that back in? How are they going to scaffold that back in? What are they going to do with that, and how are they going to meet the standard during that time? Then the fourth was professional development. We received a lot of information and feedback from our teachers to what professional development they felt like they needed going forward, whether it be a NTI, be a hybrid or normal schedule. Teachers indicated that they needed technology PD. They also indicated they need mental health PD around social emotional learning, curriculum design and alignment given our reentry plan. So if it's NTI, if it's a hybrid, if it's normal, we know normal. If it's NTI, we've had a taste, we're going to get better at it. But if it's a hybrid, that's where some time has got to be spent with our teachers in the planning. Parent-student video on how to navigate the Google Suite and student email. PBIS, training for substitute teachers, and HTIP will be critical to this success and focus on our mentorship that we have here with our new teachers. And just on a side note, that became a concern of mine as someone of 21 years experience. If I knew my first year going into teaching and I was going to hit NTI, I don't know what I would have done. But every indication that we got from principals and from the teachers, they feel that our new teachers coming out of college, they are more prepared now with technology resources than I was or 5 years ago. So they feel comfortable with the new teachers that we're hiring and their ability. But we still have to be very cautious and very focused with pairing them up with quality mentors. Then we looked at NTI and hybrid platforms. This also can go into normal, but normal is a lot of face-to-face instruction. The elementary, their focus is on Google Suite, Edpuzzle, GoFormative, Screencastify, Khan Academy, Quiz, and online reading platforms such as Epic, Lexia, iExcel, and so on. Middle school, they utilize Google Suite, Edpuzzle, GoFormative, iExcel, Screencastify, Quiz, YouTube, Big Universe, BrainPop, Desmo, Deck Toys, Vocabulary, it goes on and on. And one of the things out of this that we heard quite a bit is standardizing what template we're going to use for all of our students at the elementary level, at the middle school level, and at the high school level. Because as a parent, one thing that I really liked is the standardized template. I knew how to help my child. I knew where to go and do things. But they were going to look at standardizing, depending on what our reopening plan is, standardizing a template, but also in standardizing that a template using specific programs district-wide. Instead of using 20 programs, let's really set our focus in 3 or 4 or 5 programs depending on the grade level. At the high school, they use the Google Suite, Khan Academy, iExcel, YouTube, Desmos, and various web pages based upon content level. And then the last 2 bullets, organization of the Google Classroom in a comment format for each level, and on an NTI schedule, planning at least 2 weeks at a time. The 6th area is special ed. That's a big one. There's no way I could sit here all night and talk to you about all the different options for special ed and accommodations we're going to have to look at. The ARCs will have to amend all IEPs, and this is if we go NTI or a hybrid schedule. Supplemental aids and services will have to be amended to include remote learning, such as modification and frequent feedback. Special ed teachers will focus on the IEP goals with the exception of a resource at the secondary. Remind general ed teachers of the IEP services of their students. Check more frequently with IEP students than the regular ed students. Special ed teacher will use specifically designed lessons and tasks along with SDI for their IEPs. All students have access to Chromebooks. Frequency of services have to reflect that of a non-disabled peer regarding instructional days. SAS or supplementary aids and services sections can have specific services needed for NTI days. Our seventh area was preschool. For NTI and hybrid, those that start new do not know how to operate and navigate in a school setting on a regular basis. That is one of the major concerns of our preschool. Social skills will be a challenge on NTI or hybrid, because how can you learn social skills with your peers if you can't be in a school to practice those? On an NTI hybrid or normal schedule, essential skills have been reviewed and what pieces they have to have and during what periods. Lesson delivery will be around essential skills and assessments online. Thelma B. Johnson will continue on a delayed start. The state has delayed one-to-one meetings in the home. They will utilize technology for those meetings. Our eighth area is mental health. Each school will have to have an SEL or social emotional learning plan that will have to include identify and plan to address staff needs, include and prioritize a fully staffed mental health team, and you must prioritize relationships and human connection. Mental health counselors are available currently 1 day per week during the summer. They will have to support transitions for those students in the first few weeks. They will have to address grief, loss, and traumatic stress for staff and students, re-engage students who are disconnected from instructional activity. They'll focus on barriers to learning, and they'll have to rapidly identify students who are having trouble transitioning. Education for our students on social distancing and the awkwardness of that and support of that. They have to publicize what emotional supports are available for all, staff, students, and parents included. Then the last one, number 9, is grading. On NTI, assignments given will be more targeted to the standard and be around assessing mastery of the standard. The assignments may be fewer but more targeted and related to the standards to assess mastery and will be graded on the normal scale. In terms of the hybrid, elementary will rely more on class assignments to be graded and not as heavily into the online assignments. Efficiency is the key to balancing instruction and assessment of the mastery of learning. Questions?
We'll get them down. We'll get them to Morgana, give you time to digest them and look at them, and we'll hammer them out next week. What do you
Thank
think?
you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you. A lot of information. Ms. Carter.
The next task force that we're going to talk about tonight is Personnel Task Force. We have a committee made up of staff members ranging from superintendent to our teaching staff, custodial supervisor. We have school representatives. We have district representatives. Just a good mix of folks to talk about our main expectations. And the first slide you'll see there is talking about, we've been nicknamed it COVID leave. We have regular FMLA, and sometimes that can get confusing or a little, sometimes clear as mud. Now we've added in several other options. So Adrian Cruz presented at our committee, and it went for about 30 minutes. And then at the next committee meeting, she presented this graphic, and it made it a whole lot easier to follow because there are so many different tenets to this. And that's a screenshot of the graphic. And what you'll see is that whenever someone needs to take off, we'll ask if it's COVID related or not. If it's not, it goes to our regular FMLA process. That's on the right side of that. On the left side, if it is COVID related, then you have the Family First Coronavirus Response Act, new acronym FFCRA. Nickname for that is COVID Emergency Paid Sick Leave. You have Emergency FMLA Expansion Act. It's also known as the COVID Child Care Leave Act if there is an issue with child care. That can be covered under this act. There's intermittent leave, whereas someone might be able to work from home or work telecommute or that type of thing. There's regular FMLA. So we have talked about all of those different options and how that will go into effect for the fall semester because the COVID leave, right now the way it's written, it goes is in effect until December 31st of 2020. So that is one of the things of our committee to talk about. So on the next slide, we are also talking about different job duties and expectations whenever we return to school. We talked about broadening the scope of everyone's position with and we all have set job descriptions.
Miss Carter, could we
Yes,
pause
sir.
for a minute, please?
Absolutely.
Do we still have a video signal? And are we working on turning the video around?
That's the Google where we tried to get Casey and John Hagan code out on. But as far as I know, we're still streaming.
Okay. Okay. And then other board members, do you all have these presentations in your board packet? Because I do not. And I've refreshed my screen several times. Okay. So I can't see. The only information I can see is what's on the screen. I don't have it to look at.
Oh, it was under one, it was one big presentation under the first item, which would be the logistics. Yes, the logistics task force, see, and it's all together. Yeah, you've got it.
It's one
Is that-
PowerPoint.
Yeah, it's all one thing. You just got to
This
go
is-
from
My
one.
apology then.
Yeah,
one
no,
slide
no
to the
I thought it was
next.
just that first part.
Now, I'm on slide 18,
Thank you.
and I'm
Got 'em?
also a member of
Right
the-
on, Kirk.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ginger. Thank
No
you.
worries. I'm on the logistics task force as well because a lot of our, logistics staff, all of that blend in. And Ms. Wolf was on the agenda for our last personnel task force committee meeting to update our committee. We talk back and forth just so that, it helps us as we're talking about things. One of the things, job duties, all hands on deck whenever we return to school and making sure that we are all working together to make everything about our students' educational experience make it as positive, productive, and efficient as possible. So that's one of the expectations of our committee. Reviewing any policies or procedures that might need to be updated, amended, tweaked, however you want to call it. At this time, we have none to present to you, but that's also one of the expectations of our committee. And then also just talking about all of the concerns and issues that have been presented thus far. We know that this is this whole process is fluid and we're working through it, but at one point, we talked about if students can't eat in the cafeteria. Well, part of the KRS is a 30-minute duty-free lunch for our certified staff members. So how would we cover that? That was one of the initial topics. Now if we can serve in the cafeteria, that might not be. One of the things, looking at substitutes. A large portion of our substitute workforce are retired teachers. Are they, if they are retired, sometimes they hit one of those categories of being high risk. So what would we do if we don't have a lot of substitutes available? What if we, and looking at, we're going to survey our substitutes to find out, most of them have returned a letter, yes, I'm willing to work in the 2021 school year, but we want to make sure that, would they be available for long-term leaves? Would they, in light of the pandemic and all of the different things, are they still willing to sub? And so just looking at substitutes will be a key factor in this if we have staff members who can't report to work on a daily basis. And then written procedures for return to work, whatever that might be. This is a fluid process, as I've said quite frequently. We are planning as best we can given information we know today. That can change, as you know, by the day, by the hour. So once we get to that point where we're returning to work and we have those written procedures, we want to just make sure that we have continuity and consistency across the district, and that we also share that message, that info with our partners, like collaborative partners, anyone else that is involved directly with our staff members, with our students. So I've used the analogy. It's kind of like whenever you're planning a wedding, or if you're pregnant, there's so much you can do to get ready. I'm just saying, this is the analogy. There's so much that you can do to get ready.
I can't line with that one.
You plan, you get everything ready, but until you get to the big event, you've got all of these things in place, the what if, everything's ready, but until the day happens, the going back to school, the guidance of the day, we are making all of the plans, contingencies. Well, when you say making plans, we are trying to look at all of the details so that we're ready for whatever might occur whenever we get to have our students and our staff back in the building.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll get whatever needs to go to Morgana. Ms. Mortis?
I just want to repeat what I was saying earlier. Our video is still streaming upside down. We do not have any issues with the audio. However, once we finish streaming at the end of the meeting, we'll be able to edit it, turn us up the right side, and then repost it. So you can see it correctly then.
It's also the wrong date. I've had someone text
Okay.
me, so we need to change the date.
Okay. It's an incorrect date, so we'll have that fixed. As far as communications goes, we know that is vital and essential during this time. And first of all, we've just started a reopening section that is on our district website under the Spotlight message. And on that section, we're still working on that. It's a work in progress, but we have a FAQ section with link to state guidelines, health and hygiene, some of our survey results, and if we have an updated calendar, we will add that there. We'll continue our end-of-week video message. We usually do those throughout the school year, so now we're doing a special summer series to let everyone know and keep them informed about what's going on in the district. We'll continue to work with our media to get the word out about what school is going to look like, and we'll also be sending out parent link messages. There is a new email address, communications@henderson.kyschools.us, that we regularly check that, and like Ms. Stanley said earlier, we made that available for you all tonight, all the comments that were shared. We also have a comment box at the board office that you can drop by and leave a comment in our box. But we know communications is going to be very important coming from the district level and also from our schools. So we'll be keeping you up to date and informed.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Ms. White?
Thank you for allowing me to come this evening and share with you all about our current plans for reopening childcare for the summer. Governor Beshear actually gave the date to reopen as of today, so many of the childcare locations in Henderson did reopen today. And again, he's given those guidelines under the emergency KAR. Our proposal for Henderson County Schools childcare to reopen for the summer would be July 13th to allow for all of the appropriate things to occur regarding cleaning, getting in all of our supplies, all of our PPE, for the teachers to develop lesson plans with all of the changes that are occurring, and lots of communications to our families regarding all of these changes. We will keep the locations and the times the same. The 3 locations that are typically open, even when we have snow days or are on holidays, are Thelma B. Johnson, where we currently are, Bengate Elementary, and East Heights Elementary, and the other elementaries feed into those schools. To provide those services. We would keep our hours the same from 6:15 a.m. to 6 p.m. The recommendations that we have received are to operate at 50% capacity. We can have no more than a 10-to-1 ratio of children per teacher. And so we will have a maximum of 30 students at each location. So our directors are reaching out and prioritizing. We feel our goal is to reach those families who need to go back to work 5 days a week and need this service provided for their families. And so we're going to start with those families. And if we need to have a wait list, we will create one of those. But that's going to be our top priority. Typically, we offer anywhere from 3 to 5 days, but we feel we need to try to meet the needs of the families who need to go back and are going to have to work 5 days a week and need this service provided. We have guidelines for our staff. They always have required trainings. They have some additional trainings that will be required of them this year. They will, of course, follow all the Healthy at Work guidelines. They will be expected to wear face coverings at all times that they are working with students or in any type of proximity, even with staff. And they will also wear gloves as required when they're cleaning, serving food, those types of things. They will have, just as all of us are doing every day, daily temperature checks and the answering of symptom and contact questions that will be kept confidential per HIPAA. We want them, conversations that I've had with our directors is that, we have to be very sensitive to everyone's situations, our staff and everything they've been dealing with for the past few months, as well as our families and children as they return. So we're preparing just kind of some informational presentations to understand these changes. I'm thinking about our little 4 and 5-year-olds, like, why is everybody in a mask? I mean, they don't understand. Why are you wearing gloves all day? Miss Lori, I don't get that. And so just to kind of help understand that, and as Mr. Thompson mentioned, the social emotional learning, I've been talking with Jamie Like and the mental health counselors about possibly having them do some virtual lessons with the students during this time, just to understand, because things are going to be so different when they come back from what they're used to. And we're not school, but it is different from what they expect in childcare also. Our staff actually started work today to prepare in cleaning, sanitizing, completing all their training, and preparing their lessons. We will obviously have lots of new guidelines for our families. We have been working on this for weeks as well now, and just like everything else, it does seem to be continuously changing on us. So we are modifying, and we'll have that as up to date as possible. Some of the changes that can be expected, we will do like car rider lines. It will be a drop-off and a pickup in that way. We will actually have families sign up for specific time slots to drop off their children. They will, of course, have to answer the health questions. The child will have his or her temperature checked before the parent leaves. We will have only one child enter at a time. They will wash their hands. We have purchased portable sinks, I guess you would call them, where they will wash their hands as soon as they come in the doorway, and then they will be escorted to their classroom. This procedure will be the same at dismissal. We will unfortunately not be able to allow parents or guardians in the building unless it is an emergency situation or without the director's approval of the director at the center. It's one of those things that we want the least amount of contact as possible, and those are the guidelines we've been given. If parents or guardians have to interact with child care staff, we will ask them to please consider wearing face coverings also. Continuation of those guidelines, the paperwork for our registration of required documents, we will all complete electronically with DocuSign. We are also moving to an online payment system. This has also been highly encouraged for several years through our audit process, and now it's definitely encouraged to reduce contact with folks, passing money or checks or those types of things. So we are going to be moving to an online format for all payments. Unfortunately, we of course can take no field trips or host any events. If someone has a birthday, we can't celebrate those types of things with family or friends coming in to do that. So we have some plans to do things like virtual field trips, and we will be able to do some things outdoors. However, there are a lot of things that we typically take the kids to the swimming pool and it's not open, or take the kids to the movies, and these things won't be happening per state guidelines. Children will be expected to follow some social distancing guidelines. It will be 10 to 1, and we also realize the younger they are, the more challenging that will be, but we will have some things in place to try to honor that as much as we possibly can. In addition to their temperature being checked when they first get there, we are also going to periodically do that throughout the day as well, and that is actually going above and beyond expectations. Continuation of that, obviously children will be permitted to families will bring any medications as they normally would. Sometimes our little ones do get dirty or spill things, or some cases have accidents, so changes of clothes, and they do have the option as always to bring their lunch if they choose. We cannot, however, allow them to bring anything from home, toys, blankets, pillows, those types of things, because of the concerns regarding those items. The temperature check is that if a child has a fever of 100.4 or greater, this is in writing from the state, word for word, the parent or guardian will be contacted and expected to pick up the child within an hour. We will isolate that child with supervision during that time and, provide whatever treatment that we can to make sure the child is safe. But in failure to do that, to result in not coming and picking up their child, we may have to remove them from childcare permanently because we can't, take care of them all day. So we want to make sure we have that communication clearly out there and have enough contacts to be able to get that child taken care of as soon as possible if he or she is sick. Other things that we're doing to prepare, I've already mentioned several of these. Again, moving to the online payments, doing the portable sinks at the entryway, making sure that we have all the appropriate PPE and cleaning supplies. You've probably heard our custodians and maintenance staff have purchased misters. We're actually purchasing misters at each of ours, and we'll be sanitizing throughout the day as well. We've coordinated with child nutrition for meal delivery. As I stated previously, our classes will be 10 to 1, which will remain the same with the same staff daily. That is what the guidelines have requested for us to do. In addition to that, we've done the drop-off and pickup procedures to limit the contact. We're going to have an individual basically throughout the day who is responsible for cleaning and sanitizing throughout the day all of the items, or as kids move to different locations, if they need to go outside for something, then everything in their room can kind of be taken care of during that time before they come back in. Some other things that we've done, as I mentioned, since we can't do the field trips and those types of things, we have purchased technology. We've been working with Mr. Gordon on getting some Chromebooks for our older kiddos, as well as purchasing some iPads for our younger ones, and we're looking at some of our instructional technology programs to be able to provide our students during the day as well. We are creating areas for learning as well as activities to meet the social distancing guidelines through all of this, and our communications to our families regarding all of these changes and expectations. And again, we will wait for any questions that you may have, and hopefully the go-ahead that you'll make the decision that we are able to reopen on July 13th, please.
Thank you for the presentation and information.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda would be old business and.
Mr. Waller.
Hello?
Do we have any reports about summer activities? We asked for that at our Friday, June 11th board meeting. Do we have any changes about summer activities?
Can you be more specific?
I think I remember asking specifically for an athletics summer activity update, and during the meeting, you stated we plan to put that on the June 15th meeting.
Yes, I think those were specific questions that you were asking about COVID and athletics, and I think one was about contact tracing.
And one was about like what decision-making would be in place for if one activity, a student or an employee had symptoms or self-quarantine, then what the decision-making would be to restart that activity,
Sure. And I
close
think
that
I
activity
shared with
down.
you. Yes, I think I shared with you all that some of those questions would be answered tonight in the presentation. And in that flow chart that Ms. Carter presented to you, it talks about from the staff point of view as you go through, if somebody needs a leave of absence, well, that would be because they tested positive for COVID or had a sickness or illness. Some of the specific questions that I wrote down were more geared towards athletics, and we didn't put athletics on the agenda, and so I felt that would be covered in our work session meeting the following week.
So
But I can-
I want to make sure that I understand. So when we meet next Thursday, we will have a specific item about summer
Yes,
activities.
yes.
And
That-
we will entertain whether we will start and when we will start and how we will start.
Well, the entertainment of starting and how we started it at our last meeting, we voted on nothing before what would have been the normal KHSA summer shutdown. That's what we voted on.
We voted.
Yeah, so tonight-
for
And-
everything for only coaches and
Virtual.
athletes. Yeah, for virtual till June 28th is
Yes.
what we did.
And that we wouldn't consider prior to, well, I'd have to look back at the
I'd have
minutes.
to look back
But
too.
neither here nor there. Yes, the athletics subject will be on the work session next week.
For next week. Thank
Yes.
you.
Can I share, Mr.
well,
Waller,
just to
that some
clarify
of
that-
Excuse me. Go ahead.
I was going to say, some of the questions that Mr. Haynes asked last time, we did cover, because I wrote those down, like the anticipation of the use of gloves and masks, and those were presented, I think, throughout the presentation tonight. Contact tracing, a question about if there's a hot spot, will some schools stay open and will some stay closed? That's not a question we would be prepared to answer tonight. What decisions would we have if we had a positive result, and how would that affect kids versus staff members? We touched on that with our substitute comments and the flow chart again. And then what are the factors to close a sport? Those were the ones that I had written down. So we hit on the ones except for the ones that were geared towards athletics for tonight.
Okay.
Thank you. Go ahead, Wes.
I was just gonna say for the agenda next week, I would imagine there's gonna be an action that can be taken for the timeline of starting back up sports as well. We're not gonna wait till the July regular meeting to vote on it when the dead period ends before that, right?
No, we were
Okay.
going to get some information from Mr. Andrews. He was going to is that right?
Uh,
What the exact date of the shutdown, of the dead period was, and so forth and so on.
So I just want to
But-
make clear that my no vote for starting was only because we did not have presented to us a plan for what would happen in the decision-making process if we had a student or a coach who had symptoms or who voluntarily told us they tested positive. And that specifically, I want to hear next week.
Sure, and that's
Noted.
why I think it would be good to have Clay Horton
Sure.
here from the CDC to be able to respond and answer to that
As
question.
soon as that answer is given, I'm ready to take the vote again about summer activities.
No problem. We can vote on that as an action item either next week or at another special called meeting, but I don't think we would want to address that since we've had several of our athletes that show up positive in COVID-19 tests in the last 3 days. Thank you. Next item on the agenda would be the update from old business of New Jefferson Elementary School.
John Hagan again on speakerphone. So John Hagan, they can hear you when you're ready to speak.
Okay. Appreciate everybody having me tonight. Just to give you a little update, I think Ms. Stanley likely shared my last week's update with you, but all the site clearing has been completed. The topsoil's been stripped and stockpiled on the site. There are 3 retention basins that have to be constructed. If you've been out to the site, you've probably seen the one behind the middle school is now complete. So that's going to get the seed and straw probably tail end of this week. Contractor is going to mobilize a second crew to concentrate on the storm drainage while the first crew can continue on with their earthwork itself. Earthwork's underway. So things are finally moving in the right direction. We got a good week of weather coming for us, so should get a lot accomplished this week. That's kind of the good news. Not necessarily bad news, but we anticipated some soil remediation needed to be performed based upon the geotechnical report, and that's exactly what we're dealing with right now. So last week, at the direction of the civil engineer and the special inspections company, the cement stabilization was performed on the building pad and all the parking areas. So about 4 days worth of work. We talked about including that work in the base bid of the contract, but to mind our budget, we only wanted to pay for what would actually be required. We didn't want contractors throwing a bunch of money in their bid at an unknown. So this work's being performed on a time and material basis, where our guy in the field is monitoring the man hours, and Ellie Gregg, who's the special inspections agency, is monitoring the actual cement that is placed on the site. So we're getting that pricing in now. I haven't had a chance to review all of it, but I likely will be bringing this change order to the board next month. But I wanted to make you aware of it. Is a substantial amount. I mean, well in excess of $200,000 we're talking about. So I didn't want to just show up with a change order next month and, not prepare the board for that. But, it's
That's
like I
not
say, it's something
close
we
to what
knew.
we had
So
to
it was a
do here, though.
situation with the site. We just, felt this was the most economical way of handling it, doing it on a time and material basis. So that's kind of where we are. Hopefully between now and the next board meeting, we'll have the site cut to grade. All the parking lots should be cut to grade, and the rammed aggregate piers should be underway. So the next 6 weeks or so, a lot of action should be taking place out there.
Comments? Workers moving. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, sir.
Appreciate it.
Next item would be Ms. Cloutier for the semi-monthly check discussion.
Okay, I included all the information in your packet, and since Mr. Haynes requested this, I will let him lead the discussion. All I ask is that if it's decided to do this, that we be given ample time to do it, not try to start it July 1 of this year. With all the other Hanover implementation I have going on, we just don't have the staff to do it. So I'll let you ask questions or lead the discussion.
The information was contained within our packet, and if you've got some questions, comments, Kirk, since this was a subject matter you wanted, there is no action item to be addressed under this. It's just have at it.
So in the minutes from June 10th, 2019, there's a lengthy paragraph in our minutes about the discussion. I was a little disappointed at the time, but didn't state so, that the survey went out to the staff after their work year. Teachers are not required to log in and check their email when their contract is already finished, but even our staff is excellent, and we had 675 responses a year ago when they were on their summer vacation. That's their preference. Our staff has certainly shown their dedication and support to our students and community during NTI. So the administration's had a year to think about this and to come up with a way to budget it. I sent an email to administration and to our board chair on May the 12th asking for this item to be on the May agenda, and it was not placed there. So I understand it might be difficult. There's also a $10,000 discrepancy between the information in tonight's board packet and the information we were given at this time last year.
Because it didn't have benefits calculated last year.
Yes, it was only a $1,000 estimate last year. So I couldn't find it, but I thought I had received an email that said that we might be trying to work out these duties and add them to one of our other staff members, but I couldn't readily locate that. I think for our staff, overwhelmingly want to have a change in their pay schedule. And we worked hard with our contract with Hanover to make our classified staff salary competitive. I think we were going to look at our certified staff salary this year, but that's not a real difficult change from the eyes of an employee to change to bi-monthly pay when most other public and private employers around us have bi-monthly pay schedules.
We're already 2 employees short in finance. I absorbed the assistant finance director position and another AP accounts receivable person. I absorbed about 85% of that job that we didn't fill. So we just don't have the staff right now. I'm not saying I can't do it. I'll do it. I'll do what is the pleasure of the board.
Excuse me. Did you have a comment, Wes?
I did.
Go ahead.
Did you say you absorbed the assistant finance manager job as well? So what's your staff consist of right now?
An administrative assistant. I have accounts payable and an accounts payable federal programs that handles all the federal grants. And I have one payroll person.
And this is going to double the payroll work. So I understand your request on adding a person, but I don't see adding one person to do this change. But I could see maybe backfilling the assistant finance manager, maybe bumping up the salary range to maybe coach or build a bench for your team. Maybe that as a position.
Okay, obviously, we've got some thoughts, we've got some recommendations, we've got some concerns on your part. So we have no action item on the agenda. We'll give this back to Morgana and Cindy, and at the, what month is this, June, July meeting, come to the July meeting with a recommendation that would require action for this board, please.
I'd prefer that we add it to next week's work session. We've had, it's been in the
That's
minutes
good-
for
that's
a
good
year.
request. I understand it's for a year. I've asked that it come back for the July meeting. Thank you.
Okay.
We've got a lot to discuss next week. Next item would be new business, parent engagement survey.
Yes,
Ms.
sorry, I was
Stanley.
taking a note there. So you have quite a bit of information in your packet about the parent engagement survey. The parent engagement survey is the work that we are working on with Studer Education. And so we entered into this thinking back in January and February before the pandemic came about. And in May, it was time for us to give out a parent engagement survey to our parents. We didn't administer this. The Studer Education Collaborative did all of the work for us. So our hands were pretty off of it, other than just sending out parent links with familiar voices to parents saying, hey, we have a parent engagement survey. We'd like to know what you think about our schools as a whole. At that point, because we were in a pandemic, we did ask them to add about 8 questions to the survey to just give us some feedback about NTI days and COVID. And they did that graciously for us. So I know you all have all the information that you need, and I won't go through that. You have district results and you have individual school results in your board packet. This slide just gives you a little brief overview of where we are. The scale was a 1 to 5, and overall the Henderson County Schools had an overall mean of 4.08. The team that reported the data back to us actually used the word phenomenal for the first time out for a parent engagement survey. That's a pretty phenomenal result, are the words that the team used. We had 920 parents and caregivers that responded, and they thought that was a very good number, especially, again, for the first time out. 39% of all the responses hit strongly agreed, which they call the top box. So they complimented our schools and our district on that. She said the strengths that they found were on the questions that asked, did the family feel like they were treated with respect? Were they proud to have their child at their particular school? And and would they recommend the school to other parents? And why they pulled those statements out, she said, to communicate to us as strength. Obviously, they had the highest numbers, but that goes to show how important relationships are among our teachers and our principals and our staff. That if parents are going to tell you that they're going to go up to bat for their school and that they're proud and they feel like there's respect, that when we have tough decisions to make and that there are things that we're asking in addition, parents, that there's good relationships there, and it's very doable. She said that we should focus on receiving feedback from teachers more frequently and in a positive way, and that receiving positive phone calls and notes and emails would be a place for us to look at, to focus, to strengthen parent engagement. So those would be 2 areas as we're building school improvement plans, district improvement plans, and our strategic plan, that's what we want to help focus on in a parent engagement. So I wanted to just give you that brief overview And you have all the school and district data in there.
Any questions with regards to the survey? Thank you, Morgana. The next item would be the salary schedule. Ms. Carter,
Yeah, calendar.
I missed something? Calendar change. Casey Wolf, I'm sorry. This is information.
I'm calling, but there it goes. See if she answers nicely. See, she's on speaker. It's me. I think she'll be okay. Sorry. I told her it was right after parent engagement, so she may have.
Hi, you have reached Casey Farmer.
She's out to supper, sounds like to me.
I'll keep trying if you want to go ahead. Sorry.
We'll,
Oh, here she is. Casey, you ready? All right, thank you, ma'am.
Okay, I'd like to, I'm not sure if you guys heard any of where I started, so I'll start over. I want to expand, I'd like to expand a little bit on one of the focus areas I mentioned earlier, which was the reopening model, when we would reopen for the school calendar. But before I do that, I kind of want to take you back in November and December of 2019, the board approved our original 2021 calendar. That approval was done before pandemic occurred. So as a result of the pandemic, we ended the school year through NTI days and ended the school year early on May the 4th. In May of 2020, Governor Beshear recommended that all school districts create an early school calendar, a traditional school calendar, which we had already done. That was our original calendar. And he recommended a late start calendar. So after that recommendation, as a district, we started discussing another calendar. We had not prepared a late start calendar because we normally don't. So after that directive, I began meeting with the logistics task force, and discussing with staff members, Ms. Stanley, in addition to my calendar committee. I kept them in the loop on everything that was going on through emails, sharing calendars as we discussed calendars, asking for input from the calendar committee members. So all of that being said, the calendar in front of you is the calendar that we came up with. This is a little bit different than a calendar you've seen before. This is a variable instructional calendar. This calendar has 1,062 hours, instructional hours, which will actually total up to 164 school days if we were to go with this type of calendar. You can see that our start date on this calendar is August the 26th. That is a late start. It is very close to Labor Day. The biggest difference between this calendar, well, there's two major differences. Obviously, first is the start date. The original calendar, which the board has already approved, has our students starting school on August 12th. If the board were to consider later on looking at a late start calendar, the late start calendar I have here would start on August the 26th. The second big difference between the traditional calendar and the variable instructional calendar would be the number of school days. By law, if we use a variable instructional calendar, then we are required to meet the guideline of 1,062 instructional hours, but we are not required to attend school a minimum of 170 days. The calendar you have in front of you would have students attending school 1,062 hours, and the last day would be May 18th, and that would be the 164th day of school. Other than that, I left in all the traditional calendar, which is already approved. I left in all dates, such as fall break, spring break, Christmas break, Thanksgiving break. We had a day off in February, a day off in March built in. I left all of that the same. None of that has been changed. So I would just like you to be able to look at this calendar and consider this calendar if there's a necessity for a late start. Any questions?
Any comments, Morgana?
No, I really don't. Casey explained it very well. I feel like there are many districts in Western Kentucky that are looking at an August 26th start date, and that I think is to just look at from the point of view of allowing our staff to have some extra days before school starts, also to prepare for the 2021 school year, because we might start right out of the chute as traditional. And then if the spike comes, we have to change to something else. So we know it's possible throughout one school year we could have several instructional models. And we feel like, that August 26th start date would provide an opportunity for our staff to have some extra professional development days before we start our 2021 school year.
Any questions? Kirk, please.
So we're not making any changes to the adopted calendar tonight. Is that correct? This is our official calendar right now. Okay. And then, Ms. Wolf, I heard you say we came up with. Who is the we?
Casey,
Yes.
Kirk just asked who is the we.
The we is a lot of people. We have discussed this calendar in our leadership team, which involves staff members at the board office. We have discussed this in our logistics task force committee. I have discussed this and worked on this with all of the other directors of pupil personnel in this area, in addition to, like I said, sharing this calendar with my calendar committee, and they have given me input also.
And I can attest, Kirk, that she did share this with the calendar committee, did ask for input from the calendar committee, and that input was given. That included everybody that was on the calendar committee.
So we would have minutes from the calendar committee.
She has the emails, as well as the original minutes.
There's a delay, sorry. Casey, I think the last question was about the minutes. You would have record of what people shared with you, correct?
Yes, I have all of the emails. Yes, that's correct.
The last question was about the minutes. Sorry.
It's a tough job over there.
We're good.
There's a delay, I think you said.
Anything else?
Okay,
And then I have one more question.
Sure.
So if we need it to change, what's the deadline to submit an amended calendar to KDE? Like if we need it to go with the August 26th day as the first instructional day?
I'd probably actually have to look that up, Kirk. I probably can't tell you the exact when it becomes amended. The state has given us a waiver to resubmit until July 31st. Yeah, but I'd probably want to confirm that for sure. I think it's important to our families to possibly look at this at the work session next week.
And
Right.
I would suggest, again, as part of the other stuff that we're looking at as school starting and all that, that it would be on that discussion next week too. So we'll have that as part of the agenda. Thank you. Other questions?
Yes, I have one more.
Good gracious,
So,
man.
yes, I've spent a lot of time reading. So either at the work session next week or our July board meeting, I would like to see and have submitted the school district calendars meeting where they looked at the amended calendar for a late start.
I didn't understand what your request was. You want it on the agenda?
I would like to see the minutes from when the committee met to look at a late start date.
The late start date
Since
was
all
by,
that email's
by
available.
email.
That's fine. I would like to see who was consulted.
Thank you. Next item, salary schedule. Ms. Carter, sorry.
Okay, I'm going to hit the highlights of the 2021 salary schedule. The certified salary schedule is on page 3. On page 4, change would be the addition of the transitional district director. On page 5, added this year, the Healthy at Work officer will have 1 district-wide. We'll have 6 at the elementary level as a extra service position. We also have webmaster as a district-wide extra service position on page 5. Page 6, we have added the middle school Gateway to Technology stipend. It's part of the CTE extra service areas. Also on page 6 at the bottom, archery, a stipend or extra service supplement for head archery coach and assistant archery coach. Followed by page 7, adding an extra service supplement for the head bass fishing coach and head bowling coach. Page 8, adding an extra service supplement for the head wrestling coach, assistant wrestling coach on page 8. Moving to page 9 of your attachment there are several updates to this. This is for our starting at the top of the page, ESS Title I interventionists. The certified hourly rate will move to $25 per hour. The classified hourly rate to $14.97 per hour. Mental health counselor, $25 per hour. The certified training stipends are also in line to be the $25. Then you'll see the summer school and intercession program. These are updated for classified aides, bus drivers, bus monitors, child nutrition, whether they be the program manager, the food service assistant, delivery, or the food service manager for a summer session. And then summer workers in maintenance, technology, landscape team, paint crew, those all are adjusted for the 2021 school year. That's all on page 9. That had a lot of updates to it. Page 10 will be for substitute additions. We have, in line with the changes to our classified salary schedule, our substitute pay for our classified folks are updated. You'll see in the middle of the page. And also something that is new to if you see the under classified and certified subsequent long-term substitute teaching assignments, this is something our substitutes have asked about through the years. We have several substitutes who might do a long-term leave on day 21 of that long term, they make a higher rate of pay. They jump out of, when I say jump, they move from one long-term leave and start another one. We have some very faithful substitutes who will do several long-term leaves throughout the year. And the way our salary schedule was in the past, you had to start over on day one. So this allows for, they don't have to go through the 21 days each time. And given what we might be facing with substitutes in the future, we want to encourage our substitute staff and also acknowledge that they're a integral part of our instructional day. So that is on page 10. Then on pages 11 through 20, or through the end, those are additions and change. 11 through 15 and then 16 through 20, those were approved prior at a prior board meeting whenever Ms. Cloutier presented the Hanover study and the classified salary schedule revision. So you have reviewed all of those and approved from pages 11 through 20 in a prior meeting. So that's the highlight of the 2021 salary schedule for Henderson County Schools.
Thank you, Ginger. You have a recommendation, Morgana?
I have a question.
We'll get to that.
Yes, I'll do recommendation, the approval of the 2021 salary schedule as presented by Ginger Carter.
Okay, we've got a recommendation from the superintendent, Mr. Haynes.
So I just want to make sure. So our substitute teachers, they're hourly employees, correct? They're not.
Classified are hourly employees.
What about a certified teacher?
Certified are by the day, either
by the day.
half day or full day.
So do they get paid for the online training that's required for certified employees, like safe school training, suicide prevention training, or any other trainings that we require of them?
Not currently. Not currently. That's whenever it's a condition of hire, whenever they're going through the process of being hired, and then the update trainings as part of our yearly training, like as required by law, like safe schools, the active shooter, that kind of thing.
But we pay like our bus drivers for their yearly update training. Is that correct?
Whenever we, in the past, what we've done is if we can incorporate into what we call bank days, we include that as part of a training. If it's not, it is on our own time.
Okay, so I just want to make sure. So we're asking employees who are daily rate employees to work without compensating them.
I can tell you that as part of the hiring process, that's one of the requirements for
Like-
what you're talking about after they've been hired.
They were hired in school year 16-17, and they've been a substitute teacher
Right.
since. So they're still required to complete the trainings without pay?
That we have not included that in a daily rate up to this point, but we can always add it at your recommendation.
I would like for us, we're asking people to work without paying them. And
But
so,
we're asking them to, make sure that they are understanding of you're talking about like making sure that they have received the substitute handbook, the employee handbook, and the required trainings by law, like the active shooter. that-
suicide prevention, any of the other trainings.
the ones that are prescribed to us. And also in there, we include, that they have received a copy of the employee handbook and know the procedures.
Okay, I would,
Talking about, right?
yes,
Yeah.
because I've been a substitute teacher, so, and I know that when I submit paperwork for other things like federal loan forgiveness, substitute's not considered an employee of the district. And so I would like to make sure that we pay our substitute teachers for the training if we're going to require that of them. Okay, that's,
So would that require a change in this salary schedule that we have presented?
It would certainly require a change in our budget, so we would need the board to take action that they want us to do that. We've always considered that a piece of their employment every year, like a things to do on their to-do list, to be gainfully employed. So if the recommendation from Mr. Haynes is enough, that's fine. If you all think you need to take board action to give the administration advice, Mr. Waller, however you want us to do that.
Your recommendation is accept the salary schedule as presented.
It is.
Okay. Mr. Haynes' suggestion is that we amend it or change it to pay additional.
It's not changing the
Time.
salary schedule. On page 10, we have our daily rate listed. So if there's 3.5 hours of work to be done in training, then we pay a substitute teacher 3.5 hours. If there's 3.6 to 7 hours of work, then we pay them their daily rate just as if they were, and I know that's the practice in other surrounding school districts.
Understand that. So that would be an administration responsibility of the daily pay and how employees are going to be dealt with. That would be left with Ginger and Morgana as we go through the administration
Yes,
day to
and
day.
I was really glad to see that we increased the ESS rate to be competitive with the surrounding school districts.
So, thank you. The recommendation is that we accept this salary schedule as presented. So I'll entertain a motion that we accept
So
the salary.
moved.
Have a motion from Mr. Smith,
Second.
second by Mr. Haynes. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Votes unanimous. That we accept the salary schedule as presented. Next item on the agenda would be the consent agenda that has 11 items that would include grant application, middle school textbook surplus, child care bonus for stars, classified work calendar, certified evaluation plan, board of bond of depository for the public school funds, approved bond of treasurer form, approved donations, approved bid recommendations, first reading of a newly recommended KSBA policy update 43, and then a review and accept newly recommended KSB procedure update number 24. So you've received the consent agenda. I would entertain a motion that we accept the consent agenda as presented unless there's some question. Have a motion by Ms. Williams that we approve the consent agenda as presented. Second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Smith. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Votes unanimous. Next item would be the financial report, being the treasurer's.
The treasurer's report for the month of May includes total receipts of $6,350,328 and total expenses of $5,991,010 for a net increase in all funds of $359,318. Any questions?
I request the board's approval of the treasurer's report as presented tonight by Cindy Cloutier.
Heard the recommendation of the superintendent. Entertain a motion to accept the treasurer's report as presented. Have a motion by Ms. Williams,
Second.
second by Mr. Haynes. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Vote unanimous. Thank you. Next item would be the paid warrant report.
The paid warrant report includes the period of May 19th through June 15th and includes total paid warrants of $2,776,017.69. Any questions on the paid warrants?
I recommend the board's approval of the paid warrant report as presented tonight by Cindy Cloutier.
So you've heard the superintendent's recommendation that we accept the paid warrant report as presented. Entertain a motion to accept that. Oh, Ms. Williams made that motion. We accept the superintendent's recommendation for the paid warrants. Second
Second.
by Mr. Smith. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Vote unanimous. Next item would be personnel. You received the personnel actions that was pretty lengthy from Ms. Carter in the packet for your review, and let the minutes reflect that we reviewed that. Next item would be the superintendent's valuation. I would make one comment that prior to the meeting, we went through an evaluation with Ms. Stanley that of the 7 unique standards that we assessed her for her evaluation, that the overall evaluation was exemplary with 28 individual evaluations under the 7 unique standards. 93% or 26 out of 28 were exemplary, 7 percent, which was 2, were accomplished. So everything that was listed was accomplished or exemplary. Minutes reflect that. I appreciate that. Next item would be adjourn this meeting. I'll entertain a motion from Ms. Williams that we adjourn this meeting, second by Mr. Smith. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, the vote's unanimous. The meeting's over. Thank you. And please understand we've got a meeting next Thursday at 5:30 in this office. Thank you very much. Covered a lot of material tonight, folks. Thank you.